Good morning and welcome to Alderan Resources Investor Webinar and Conference Call to discuss its recently completed capital raising and plans for further exploration and drilling at the Detroit Copper Gold Project in Utah, USA. All attendees are in listen mode only. If you would like to ask a question, please enter it in the Q&A panel within Zoom. I will now hand over to Alderan's Managing Director, Scott Caithness.
Thanks very much, Simon, and welcome to everyone that's attending. I'm going to give you a run through of all the company's projects. I'll be brief with certain aspects of the presentation because I'm sure that some of you will have heard it before, but obviously if there's questions at the end, that's terrific. Alderan is basically focused on gold and copper projects in the Great Basin. Our projects are in Utah. The opening photograph is a photograph of the old Drum gold mine, the East Pit from the Drum gold mine. You can see the vehicles in the background. There's another, what we call the West Pit, just behind there as well. Two pits, basically of similar size, but quite substantial in terms of the size of the pit. So it gives you some feel for scale. In terms of our investment highlights, all our projects are located in the Great Basin in Utah, which is Utah is a global leading mining jurisdiction, and Great Basin is highly prospective. Detroit is our flagship project, which has got district scale gold potential. We have multiple targets. Drum, the mine that I just pointed out before in the opening slide, historical oxide gold mine, and it's had since 1989. There's certainly remnant oxide gold mineralisation has been confirmed. There are high gold grades, up to 39 grams per tonne in historical drill holes. The mineralisation is open, and there's been no testing for primary mineralisation. All the work that's been done is for oxide. Then just to the north of Drum, only 2 kilometres on our ground, we've got the undeveloped Mizpah oxide gold deposit from surface. As I said, it's undeveloped. Last gold assay grades in some of the drill holes range up to 9 grams per tonne. The mineralisation again is open. Primary mineralisation again is untested. The average hole depth at Mizpah is only 28 metres. Our next steps, basically we're on the path to drilling for resources, obviously metallurgical testing, modelling, and we've also got a program of infill soil sampling, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. Our second major project is Frisco. Frisco's actually farmed out to Kennecott Exploration, which is Rio Tinto's exploration arm in North America, and it's got potential for porphyry and breccia hosted copper gold targets. Breccia drill intersections in the past have graded greater than 1.5% copper and 0.5 gram per tonne gold. Rio's currently drilling, or just completed actually, a drill hole in what we would consider to be a classic porphyry geophysical signature and geological signature. So we haven't got results back from that yet, but they've just completed the drill hole. Our USA operational team consists of 30-year experienced Rio Tinto and Newmont veterans. The Newmont veterans have worked extensively in neighbouring Nevada and also in Utah, so they're very experienced in terms of gold exploration, in particular oxide gold as well. Alderan's market cap at the moment, only $5.1 million. Just in terms of our projects and location, you can see Utah, our Detroit project, and also Frisco and White Mountain are our 2 additional projects. They all sit within the Great Basin geology. You can see where the neighbouring, in Nevada, neighbouring Carin Belt and Battle Mountain trend is. Carin Belt that produces over 5 million ounces of gold per annum. Utah, as I mentioned, it's certainly a tier 1 mining jurisdiction, and they actually have fiscal incentives for companies to develop projects and operate within the state. Within Utah, there's obviously the world-ranked Bingham Canyon copper gold deposit, which is a Rio Tinto deposit up near Salt Lake City. And then in between Bingham Canyon and Detroit, you can see a couple of dots there. One is the Tintic area, which is within the same belt of rocks as Detroit. I mean, interesting at Tintic, there's a company there called Tintic Consolidated. They recently got for $177 million US. They basically discovered what they call, well, the tintic deposit, which has got a small vein in it, the T2 vein. It actually grades 15 ounces to the ton. It's only about 6 feet wide, so about 2.5 meters wide, and has a strike length of about 100 meters and contains about 2 million ounces. So it's primary, it's 200 meters below surface, a bit more than that. And it just gives you a feel for the sort of potential that it could exist in primary mineralization at Detroit, apart from the oxide. Our targets, obviously, at Detroit are Carlin style mineralization and tintic style, which is very similar geology. And at Frisco, we've got porphyry targets, copper gold targets, and also at White Mountain, we've got epithermal gold targets. Just a quick slide on heap leach oxide gold deposits, because it's not a particularly well-known deposit style in Australia, but it is it's very well known in the US. The US, this chart is from a couple of years ago, but basically the US has more than 190 million ounces defined in heap leach gold deposits, so oxide gold deposits, and more than 160 separate deposits. Resource grades are typically 0.4 to 0.6 grams per ton. So they tend to be low grade. Because they're heap leach cutoff, they don't need a lot of the infrastructure that your classic supergene enriched gold or primary gold deposit requires. Cutoff grades for the mines are typically between 0.15 and 0.2 grams per ton. And gold recoveries are often between 60 and 80%. So they have low capital costs and they have very low operating costs. And they are a major source of gold in neighbouring Nevada. So if you look at Australia, for example, we're talking about maybe 1 million ounces in total in terms of this style of deposit, and maybe about 6 or 7 deposits actually operating. So there's a real contrast between the US and Australia in terms of this style of deposit. It's very well known in other parts of the world. I'll just move on to the Detroit Gold Project. Basically, Alderan's gone through the process of consolidating a district. We control approximately 27 square Ks, and that includes the Drum oxide gold mine and the Mizpah oxide gold deposit. Drum produced about 125,000 ounces at a grade of about 1.2 grams per ton between 1984 and 89. Now, bear in mind, I just told you that oxide gold deposits typically at the moment in the US grade between 0.4 and 0.6 grams per ton. So Drum in context was a very, very rich oxide gold deposit. We've got about 6.5 kilometres of strike of the prospective stratigraphy that hosts both Drum and Mizpah. So the slide on the right-hand side, which shows geology, the darker blue areas are what we consider to be the most favourable host rocks. And you can see Drum sits within it and Mizpah sits within that belt. And as I say, we've got about 6.5 kilometres. In terms of access, 70 kilometres away to the nearest town of Delta, it's about a half-hour drive, 40-minute drive, good roads, 40 kilometres to a power plant. So power is not an issue. And there's also water available through the district. We have gone through a process of consolidating the district. You can see the large block, sort of higgledy-piggledy block through the centre of tenement that we don't have any longer. We actually did have that tenement. We've explored it and we've actually relinquished it it was in an option agreement. So we have actually done extensive exploration through the area to refine the area that we're focused on. Just in terms of Drum's got high-grade assays in historical drill holes. The average depth of drilling at Drum in the past was around about 48 metres. So very shallowly drilled. Grades in those holes were up to 38.8 grams per ton. There are intersections as long as 70 metres that grade greater than 1 gram per ton. And I've just written down a few of the thicker high-grade intersections that occur in those drill holes. So for example, in hole YC58A, 4.6 meters at 18 grams sits within 13.7 at 6.4. If you just scan down those intersections, you can see that there are some very, very good grade intersections. The point that I'd make is these aren't supergene enriched deposits, they're oxide deposits. So again, it raises the potential that these sorts of grades and these sorts of intersections could exist in primary rocks below the oxide. This is how basically a summary of the geology, a long section through the deposit. You can see that the rocks dip gently to the southwest at around about between 20 and 30 degrees. So shallow dips on the rocks. You can see where the mineralized zones are, and you can see that they're open and what the exploration potential is within those particular units. So the primary units that are prospective are the Tatau member and also the Chisholm member, so the red unit and the green unit. However, the mineralization does extend into some of the other units there as well. The deposit, based on historical drilling drill holes that we know of, we believe the deposit has down dip potential for at least 400 meters. The mineralization that occurs in the west pit, the Tatau unit that is below the west pit, has never been drilled, so that's completely open. When we did an assessment of the historical drilling, we estimated that between 40 and 60,000 ounces of oxide mineralization was left behind in and around the pits when mining ceased, but that deposit is open. So we don't know what the ultimate potential of this is, but we know that the mineralization is open down dip. As I mentioned before, the potential for structure-hosted high-grade primary gold is untested. So those targets, as I mentioned, the sort of target that exists at Tintic remains untested at Drum and actually right throughout the district. The work that Alderan has undertaken at Drum, our initial work was basically to verify. So as you've seen, we've modeled the historical work. We've found out what some of the grades are. And so what we've done is we've gone back in and we've resampled in the pit to try and verify and confirm that there's good grades of mineralization. We've also drilled 8 drill holes as part of that program, again, primarily to verify and confirm that what we thought was there from the modeling is there. So in terms of the rock chips in the pits, we collected 75 samples. 34 of those samples assayed greater than 0.5 gram per tonne. 20 of them assayed greater than 1 gram per tonne with a maximum of 10.7. So as an initial exploration program in that pit, that was very good in terms of verifying. The mineralization was hosted in the units that we expected it to be in. The one thing that came out of that work as well is that the geology is a little bit more complex. It's structurally complex. There's 2 bounding faults, a northwest fault and also a southeast fault. But also within those, there's steeper, more north-south or northeast-southwest trending faults within that. And then also between the different rock units, there's thrusting. So it's structurally quite complex, and we believe that the most prospective zones are where those structures intersect the right sort of geology. But basically the mineralization sits within a 400 by 600 meter open corridor. So it's open to the southwest. And so that's the focus of exploration going forward. And that's, as you can see, where we drilled the holes. The holes were drilled primarily to test the northern and southern ends of both pits. As just to try and verify. We also drilled a hole right down, you can see down the bottom in the southwest at the end of down the A on the AA section line, which is hole 7, which was to try and verify one of the historical holes that had a very good intersection, hole YC174. In terms of that verification drilling, all of the holes that we drilled specifically for verification confirmed grades of greater than 1 gram per tonne. Obviously, some of those holes were drilled in the bottom of the pit where it had actually been mined before, and some of them were drilled down the side walls. So holes 1 and 3 were drilled down the side walls of the east pit and intersected 6.3 meters at 2.9 grams within 16.2 at a gram. Hole 3, 6.5 meters at 2.5 within 17.8 meters at 1.7 grams. So very good intersection. Holes 4, 5, and 6 were both drilled in the bottom of the West Pit, so in zones that had already been mined. Each of those holes intersected good grade, but narrow intersections, but basically verifying again. And then hole 7, we drilled. Hole 7, unfortunately, stopped short of its target depth. We think we were in the right zone of mineralisation, but the hole actually had to be abandoned. The drillers lost the rods down the hole. The interesting thing about hole 7 is we had to drill through about 25 meters of waste dump material on top of the natural ground surface. And that waste dump material intersected 15.9 meters at 0.42. So again, I emphasize that the deposits currently being mined typically have a cutoff grade of between 0.15 and 0.2 grams per ton. So 15.9 meters at 0.42 is well above what would be typical cutoff for a mining operation in oxide gold in Nevada. At the bottom of the hole, we intersected 5.9 meters at 1.2 grams per ton. And so we didn't complete that hole, and our plan going forward is to go back down that hole and complete drilling through the unit that we were trying to intersect, which was the Chisholm unit. That hole, 1.2 grams per ton. It's lower grade, obviously, than what was intersected in hole YC174, which was 15.2 at 4.5. But that intersection isn't over. So it has confirmed that the mineralisation does go down into that unit down in that direction as well, which confirms that the deposit is open. At least 150 meters down dip of the West Pit and at least 400 meters down dip of the East Pit. This is just a cross section to show what we think is happening with the mineralisation. As I mentioned before, it's hosted in calcareous sediments and limestones. The East Pit mineralisation is typically 20 to 25 meters thick, and the West Pit mineralisation Chisholm unit we think is typically 10 to 15 meters thick. There are thicker intersections within, and as I mentioned before, in the historical work, there's up to 70 meter thick intersections. What we think is happening is what we refer to as ramp structures. So we think that when the mineralised units hit a subvertical structure, that basically the mineralisation thickens right up into those particular zones. And this is just an example of where we think we drilled with hole number 1, which is out the other end of essentially what was a ramp structure, which was intersected in the historical hole YC16, which intersected 56 meters at 1.8 grams per ton. And you can see as you go further east that the mineralisation narrows down again to be more consistent with the thicknesses of what we've got in hole number 1, our hole number 1. As those structures, we think that there's a number of those structures throughout the pit, and one of our objectives going forward at Drum, and I think the same lessons will be able to be applied to Mizpah, is that chasing those ramp structures will be quite important. At Mizpah, if I move on to Mizpah, Mizpah is only 2 kilometres north of Drum. The indications are that the mineralised system could be significantly larger than what's been defined in the past. There are also suggestions that there's a second mineralised horizon at depth, and that there's the primary gold potential again has never been tested. The average drilling depth was 28 meters. Again, gentle 20 to 30 degrees southwest dip, so very, very similar geological setting to Drum. There are a number of holes that were drilled into the deposit. There's over 20 holes that were drilled into the deposit that had the last assay was greater than 1 gram per ton, and up to a maximum of 9 grams per ton. Last assay down a drill hole. The strategy of the company that did the work at Drum and at Mizpah was to explore for and develop an oxide gold deposit. As soon as their drill holes moved out of oxide material, they stopped the holes. And what we found with the drilling is that you can actually drill through oxide material, then you can go into primary material, and then you can go back into oxide material as you go down. So it's not as simple as drill to a certain depth and you're going to go out of oxide and into primary, and it's all going to be primary from then on. So it's a much more complex scenario. There are thick high-grade intersections, 7.6 meters at 2.3 grams per ton, 10.7 from 1.9 at 1.9, 12.2, 1.7. So very good grades again for oxide gold deposits. And most of those intersections pretty much start from surface. So this is an undeveloped deposit. We estimated exploration potential again in a similar manner. So we put all the old drill holes together. There are about 200 drill holes in total. And as I said, over 20%, 20 of those holes, 10% of those holes ended in grades of greater than a gram per ton. We came up with an estimate of 40 to 100,000 ounces, grading between 0.4 and 0.8 grams per ton. So ballpark about 80,000 ounces. Again, the deposit is open, and it is from surface. The interesting thing that Alderan has done with its exploration is this year in the current program that we've just completed, we drilled a hole which was pretty speculative, really. It was a very much a step out exploration hole. It was 350 meters away down dip on the northern end of what you would have extrapolated the deposit to be, probably outside the northern end. Hole number 3, DD22001, we intersected 69 meters at 0.18 gold. Not fantastic grade, but what it's demonstrating is that the gold mineralizing system at Mizpah could be 2 or 3 times the size that has been defined in the past at this stage and is still open. Interesting for that particular hole, because our geologists were not particularly optimistic about it, because just to the north of it is an intrusive complex. And most of the rocks down that hole were quite metamorphosed. So they were not optimistic at all in terms of what they would get out of that hole. So to get that sort of, virtually a 70-meter intersection at 0.2 grams per ton gold was very encouraging. A couple of years ago, Alderan drilled hole 006 just to the north there, one of the green holes, and they intersected 83 meters at 0.41 gold as well. So again, emphasizing that the mineralizing system at Mizpah is significantly larger. Again, primary mineralization, never been tested. Last assay in some holes up to 9.1 grams per ton. So very, very interesting. Just in terms of the larger district potential, obviously this is summarizing our gold in soil anomalies through the prospect area. The red is greater than 26 parts per billion. The green is between 11 and 25 parts per billion. In the Great Basin, if you aren't near a gold deposit, you get 0 in soils. So it's interesting talking to our experienced geologists. They tell you any gold in soils in the Great Basin is anomalous and worthwhile following up. We have anomalies. Obviously, we've got the Drum deposit at the southern end of our area, and then we've got Mizpah midway through. But then halfway between Drum and Mizpah, we've got what we've notionally called the Midway anomaly, which is a 240-meter long anomaly with assays to 0.19 ppm. So very high grade in terms of the soils. And then, of course, we've got Mizpah, which stands out, as you would expect, as a 500-meter long anomaly with grades up to 0.16 grams per ton gold. And then further to the north, we've got the Basin main target, which is again a 480-meter long anomaly which actually occurs over 2 lines. And it's got assays up to 0.3 grams per ton. So we've got a number of these anomalies, and that's consistent with oxide gold deposits that would occur in clusters along a belt, no different from the gold deposits that occur in Western Australia. The other interesting thing about the anomalies is there appears to be an alignment along in a northeast southwest orientation aligned with structures. So when you look at the Mizpah anomaly, you can see in our tenement off on the northeastern side above the riding of Basin Main, you can see that there is another significant anomaly in soils up in that. If you actually follow the trend, it's quite conceivable that lies along a structure that actually coincides with the Mizpah deposit and trends further to the northeast. Similarly, at Drum, if you go to the southwest of Drum, you can see that there's anomalies along lines. Just to give a perspective, these lines are 200 meters apart and soil samples are 40 meters apart. So there's some infill work to be done, and we do have a few gaps in our soils as well, which is part of our future program to fill that in and better define those targets. So at this point, we're sitting with Drum, Midway, Mizpah, and Basin Main as prominent soil anomalies along that 6.5 kilometre strike length. And then we've got additional anomalies that sit along structures. If I move off to the Frisco project, I'll be brief with Frisco. Frisco, it's got potential for porphyry and high-grade breccia copper gold deposits. It's an historical copper and gold and lead zinc mining district. It's got potential, as I mentioned, for porphyry, skarn, breccia pipes. Alderan, our tenement covers 40 square kilometres, so we have a district scale play again. The Cactus area, the Cactus mine, is a copper gold rich tourmaline breccia. Look, there's historical drill holes from the 1960s and 1970s that include 20-metre intersections at 2.4% copper, 43 metres at 1.7, 22, nearly 23 metres at 2.1. So very good, high-grade intersections, fantastic intersections for companies like Alderan. Accrington, further to the south, has copper and gold-rich skarns. And then we've got the Horn silver mine, which is down in the southwestern corner. Historical reported mine grades up to 10% lead, 10% zinc, and 10 ounces to the tonne silver. This area was farmed out to Kennecott a few years ago, and they're currently earning a 70% interest. They've got to spend $30 million over 10 years. Their first milestone is $6 million expenditure to get to 55% by November next year. Just in terms of the Cactus high-grade breccia potential, there's been historical drilling, as I mentioned, back in the 60s and 70s, and also Alderan and Kennecott have drilled a few holes into this. The most recent one is a Kennecott hole, which was drilled about a year and a half ago. They intersected 41 metres, 1.9% copper and 0.6 grams per tonne gold from 250 metres down the hole. Alderan, similar sorts of grades, 32 metres, 1.2% copper, 0.3 grams per tonne gold. There's also some higher, narrower, higher grade intersections that were done by Alderan. Cactus there's a series of these breccia pipes in and around the Cactus area, which variously have higher grade copper or higher grade gold. It's never been fully evaluated. It's not really a Kennecott scale target, a Rio Tinto scale target, but it's a good indicator of significant copper mineralisation in and around that area. Then further to the south, as I mentioned before, Accrington, you've got intersections of up to 34 metres, 1% copper with a gold credit. Again, these are more skarn type deposits further to the south. Kennecott's work. Kennecott recently, in 2021, completed a magnetic survey, and that highlighted the Copper Gulch porphyry target immediately to the southwest of Cactus. This is basically two slides. One's a reduced to pole magnetic slide, and I've outlined the Copper Gulch anomaly. And then what we've got is a depth slice 500 metres below surface, which really highlights the anomaly far better than the surface interpretation and modelling. Basically, Copper Gulch is a 1.5 kilometre by 0.5 kilometre magnetic anomaly, and it's immediately to the southwest of the Cactus copper mine. The anomaly persists to greater than 500 metres. There's certainly coincident anomalous copper in surface rock chip samples. There's the right sort of alteration, and there's also a little bit of copper mineralisation in some of the holes that were peripheral to that particular target. So intersections in the old holes are up to 30 metres at 0.2% copper, so a good indicator. Kennecott's recently completed their first hole into that magnetic target. You can see on the right-hand side, the depth slice, there's a magnetic high sitting within a magnetic low and then rimmed again by a larger magnetic high feature, which is pretty much a classic porphyry signature. Look, we don't know the results from that hole. Kennecott is still in the process of logging and sampling that particular hole. So we should start to get a feel for what's in that hole in the next few weeks. But realistically, in terms of assays coming back, at the moment, there's probably about a 3-month turnaround on multi-element assays in the US. So we don't expect those results to come back until probably very late 3rd quarter or early 4th quarter. White Mountain is an epithermal gold project for us. It's still very early stage. It's got all the classic signatures of an epithermal. It's got all the alteration, argillic alteration, phyllic alteration, silica alteration. It's a 5-kilometre long zone. It's got sinter terraces, aldeanite cap, chalcedony, blackhead, and there's historical sulfur mining going on there. Alderan's done very early stage work, a little bit of ground magnetics, some reconnaissance, rock chip sampling. We've got some anomalous mercury, but we haven't really advanced this project at this stage. We're actually looking at this as being a potential, seeking a potential partner to assist us with the exploration on this. So just in terms of project highlights, really we've got at Detroit District, we've got high potential copper and gold projects. Well, within the Great Basin, all of our projects. Detroit, we've got strong gold potential in a historical copper, gold, and manganese mining district. We've got 6.5 kilometres of prospective host rocks. We've got multiple gold targets. We've got historical assays in old drill holes up to 39 grams per tonne. We've got intersections that include 13.7 metres at 6.4 grams per tonne. Again, emphasising these are not supergene enriched deposits. These are pretty much what you're seeing at surface is perhaps an indicator of what you could see subsurface. We've got at Mizpah, we've got drill holes that end in grades up to 9 grams per tonne. And our initial verification drilling at Drum has basically verified the sort of grade and the tenor and also the thickness of mineralisation from the historical work. At Frisco, we've got great copper gold potential. We've got copper gold, and we've also got lead zinc silver district there. Cactus, we've got intersections, Cactus deposit, we've got intersections that include 41 metres at 1.9% copper and 0.6 gram per tonne. Gold, we've got a number of these breccia pipes with that style of mineralisation. And Kennecott's currently drilling a significant porphyry target that's just peripheral to those breccia pipes. And at White Mountain, we've got an early stage epithermal target. Our team in the US is a very experienced operational team. Each of our team members has got 30 years plus experience, and they're all ex-Rio Tinto and Newmont. Just in terms of our news flow over the next half, obviously we've got permitting for new drill holes at Mizpah. We've actually got that done. Mizpah will be our focus with the upcoming drilling program. 2 or 3 reasons for that. Obviously, Mizpah is highly prospective. It really hasn't been touched since the mid-1980s. We also permitting. It's on federal land. There is a 5-acre rule in the US on federal land that if your ground disturbance exceeds 5 acres, then you have to go and get an environmental assessment done. That takes a little bit longer. So we're going through that process at Drum at the moment, but our priority at this stage is Mizpah in terms of that drilling. So we've got a 1,500 metre reverse circulation drilling program, which we expect to get underway in August. Some of that will be verification, and some of it will actually be to assess the larger potential of the deposit. Obviously, we want to do a little bit more modelling of those deposits, and that will guide our future exploration and evaluation. Obviously, the lab analysis, we expect if we complete the drilling program in August, maybe early September at Mizpah, then assays will take us about 6 weeks. So early fourth quarter for assay results from the drilling program. We're going to get some metallurgical test work done as well at Drum and Mizpah. We've got no reason to suspect there'll be a problem. I mean, Drum was obviously mined in the past, successfully mined in the past as an oxide gold deposit, heap leach. So we don't believe that there'll be any major issues with that, but obviously we need to confirm. Frisco, as I mentioned, the Copper Gulch drilling results, probably early fourth quarter. And that will decide whether Rio continue with their drilling. They have actually got a couple of extra drill holes designed, so it will really depend on the results they get from Copper Gulch as to whether they go forward with that. And then obviously with permitting for Drum, we expect that to take probably about 6 months, maybe a little bit more. So effectively, I'm being conservative and saying second quarter next year, and then we'll be ready to roll in at Drum in terms of further drilling. Obviously, as an ongoing part of our work too, we're constantly looking at new project opportunities to upgrade the portfolio going forward. Just in terms of the team, look, many of you will know the team, and I won't go through this in great detail. You know, the presentation's obviously available on our website, and you can go through the team yourself. But Tom Eadie is our chair. Tom's a highly experienced. He was a founding chair of a very successful Syrah Resources, also Copper Strike, Discovery Nickel. Myself, my previous job was as director of exploration for the Vedanta Group, based out of India. You know, I've had extensive experience. I spent the first 20 years of my career with Rio Tinto in Australia and Papua New Guinea and various other countries as well. Peter Williams, my predecessor as managing director, very successful geologist, geophysicist with Western Mining Corporation, also a founding member of Independence Group and founding director of Ampella Mining. Bruno Hegner heads our operations in the US. Bruno's former managing director of Rio Tinto Copper Projects and vice president of Resolution Copper. And Matt O'Hara is our company secretary over in Perth. Matt's very experienced in terms of you know, company secretarial roles, CFO roles for a number of Australian junior companies. Corporate structure. Look, I'll let you go through this yourself. Obviously, we've just gone through a capital raise, so this is the corporate structure pre-capital raise, but using basically yesterday's share price as well. So you can go through this. Our cash balance post the capital raise will be around about 1.7 million Australian dollars. And that will enable us to complete our Mizpah drilling program. Just additional information in relation to the work that we've done, the assessment that we've done of the resource or the exploration potential at Mizpah and Drum. And that's where I end. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Scott. That was a really interesting webinar. I'm sure people got a lot out of it. There have been a few questions. I feel like you might have answered them already.
Yep.
But I'll read the first one out, and then if other ones come through, I'll read them. But if you do have a question, don't forget just to put them in the Q&A. When do you expect to see the drilling results from the Frisco project by Rio Tinto, and do you expect further investment from KEX in the project?
Yeah, look, in terms of, well, as I mentioned before, the turnaround on assay time for multi-element samples, which is what they will do in terms of their assaying, is probably about 3 months in the US at the moment. If you go for a gold only, it can be a bit quicker. It can be about 6 weeks, but multi-element, we're finding it's about 3 months. So bearing in mind, they've just finished the hole, they're going through their logging and sampling process. You know, let's say samples arrive in the lab maybe early August in the next 1 to 2 weeks. You know, realistically, we are talking early fourth quarter. And look, in terms of whether they go forward or not, the advice we've had is it will depend on the results that they get from the drill hole, which is what you would expect. So look, we'll just have to be patient and wait and see. The one comment I'd make about that target is I think it's a really good target. I think it's an interesting target. I like the fact that it sits just to the south of the Cactus pipes, which are known to be copper and gold rich. So I think as far as targets go, I think it's good. It'll just be a question of how the drilling stacks up at the end of the day. Okay,
great. Thanks, Scott. Given the recent capital raise, what is your cash runway? And I guess, what are you going to use the cash for predominantly?
Yeah, look, the cash is dominantly going to be used to progress our Detroit project. So it will be used for the Mizpah RC drilling program. At the moment, we think we'll be able to drill somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 meters. That will get us probably about 20 drill holes into Mizpah, which will be reasonable in terms a reasonable assessment in terms of the verification and also indicating some of the upside potential. We'll also do infill soil sampling around to sort of better define those additional targets as well, and where we've got gaps in the soil. Look, the other thing we're always, as I mentioned before, the other thing we're always doing is assessing new project opportunities. So as they come up, we will assess them if we believe that they've got significant potential. So a little money might be spent on that. The only way we'll bring a project in, though, is if we think it significantly upgrades our portfolio.
Okay, thank you. I think I've got one more here by the looks of it. What are the next steps for the Detroit project? And it is drilling on track to commence this quarter.
Yeah. Well, look, as I mentioned before, we've got a drill rig organised. We're just sort of finalising all the details at the moment. We're finalising the actual program as well in terms of where those drill holes are ultimately going to go. We have the sites organised. It's just a question of refining it all. So we expect that drilling program to start next month. I haven't had the actual date confirmed yet by the guys, but I think it'll be sooner, probably my impression is first half of the month rather than second half of the month. So literally in the next 2 weeks or so is what I expect at this point in time.
Okay, great. There's no further questions at this time. I'll now hand back to you, Scott, for your closing remarks.
Yeah, look, well, thanks obviously everyone for attending. Look, I think with Alderan, with our projects, I think we're on the cusp of something with Detroit. I mean, the more work we do, I think the more interesting the projects become and the better they become. I'm very excited about the grade of the mineralisation based on the historical work that has been done, and also on the verification work at Detroit, at both Drum and also at Mizpah. So I feel it was sort of where we've done the district scale work. We've refined our targets, and we're on the cusp. I like the Rio target at Copper Gulch. I think that's a really good target. It's for me, it's actually probably the most interesting target they've tested to date. And so, look, I think we're tracking very well, and we should have good news flow coming out over the next 6 months. Thanks very much.